Today I'm bringing you the music producer's guide to sidechaining for professional low end. In this video I'll show you how to dial in the perfect sidechain curve, get your sidechain groove to fit your track, avoid those annoying clicks and pops, and how to use the right tools for the right job, taking your kick and bass mixing to the next level. So first, some kick and basics. Why is sidechaining so important, especially in electronic music? Well, your kick drum and bass line may sound great on their own, but because they occupy similar frequency ranges in the low end, they compete for space when they play together. A kick and bass hitting at the same time can cancel out, eat up valuable headroom, and even distort your master output. I describe this example as muddy, flabby, loose, undefined. These are all terms that we want to avoid, and we can do this by making space for the bass every time the kick plays. So here's Kickstart loaded on the bass track. It's being triggered by the kick. So every time the kick plays, the bass's volume is ducked down. This is what we call sidechaining, helping the kick to cleanly cut through the mix by automatically reducing the bass's volume whenever the kick hits. The traditional method is to load a compressor on your bass. Then route your kick signal into the compressor's sidechain input, hence the name sidechain compression, often shortened to just sidechaining. So every time the kick hits, the compressor's gain reduction turns the bass down. And now with sidechaining applied to this bass, we can describe the result as tighter, more controlled and more defined. So sidechaining can be used functionally to make space in the low end, but notice how the ducking is also giving the bass line more movement around the kick. This volume pumping is often used stylistically to add groove, bounce and movement, and that's because sidechaining has also become a compositional device. Back in the day, before sidechain compression was popular, many dance tracks used bass riffs that somewhat avoided the kick drum. One example is the classic offbeat bass line. But the popularity of sidechaining has clearly influenced how modern dance bass lines are written. Now that we know the bass can be moved out of the way of the kick automatically, we have freedom to place bass notes directly over kicks in ways that were not possible before ducking. And riffs are often played into sidechaining, influencing the groove and feel right from the start. Take this kick and bass example. With sidechaining, the two parts groove as one. But with the sidechaining turned off, the kick and bass collide and sound awful. You'd never program these notes without sidechaining. But I get it, many people do not like the stylistic effect of volume pumping up and down. If you don't want to hear the ducking at all, and you only want to make space for your kick, there are several ways to sidechain invisibly without any audible pumping. More on this later. Now let's discuss tools of the trade. When it comes to sidechaining, you have two main options: using a compressor or a dedicated volume ducking plugin. A huge pro for using a compressor is that it's free. You already have a sidechain capable compressor in your DAW. Something worth understanding is that a compressor reacts to the dynamics of the input, so louder inputs will trigger more compression and vice versa. This is why I use a compressor when I want ducking that reacts more when the trigger is louder and less when the trigger is quieter. However, compressors have some downsides. First, they have somewhat limited control compared to modern tools. The compressor's attack is usually kept at minimum when ducking for the fastest response. That leaves only the release and sometimes hold for shaping the curve. And because the compression follows the length and shape of your kick, it's tricky to create ducking that's shorter than your input signal. Though you can overcome this limitation somewhat by high-pass filtering the signal that the compressor is listening to. Or you can use a silent ghost trigger. Here's how to do it. Set up a short sound like a click. Mute it in the mix, and route the signal into your compressor's sidechain input to trigger ducking. Because the click trigger is short, the compressor's release phase will engage much sooner, giving you more control over the release. And if you want your bass to pump over a kickless breakdown, you can silence your actual kick, but keep the trigger running. And you can program sidechain patterns that do not follow the kick. Anyway, back to compressor downsides. A compressor is a multi-purpose tool with lots of parameters to dial in. Its workflow isn't designed for sidechaining only, and compressors can create clicks and pops, especially when sidechaining bass. Stay tuned and I'll show you how to avoid these clicks later in the video. Now let's talk about dedicated sidechaining tools. A volume shaping plugin uses an LFO curve to modulate the volume of your signal. Just add it to your bass track and load a curve. The default sync mode repeatedly triggers the LFO in sync with your DAW. It's not reacting to the kick, but instead ducks at a set rate. This is handy for house, techno, or 4-to-the-floor music. This isn't actual sidechaining in the traditional sense because the ducking isn't being triggered by a signal from another track. However, route your kick signal into the plugin's sidechain input, and audio mode follows the rhythm of your kick, no matter the kick pattern. And then you've got MIDI mode. Route MIDI into the plugin and the ducking will follow any MIDI pattern you play or program. This is usually the rhythm of your kick, but you can vary it for more creative patterns. You can watch my Shaperbox MIDI secrets video for more on MIDI triggering. Now, precision matters, especially when it comes to low end. And with a volume shaping plugin, you can sculpt and tweak the exact curve you need for your kick to punch through your bass. The plugin might be based on draggable curve presets, as found in Kickstart, or it might have presets and let you draw your own sidechain curve from scratch, like Shaperbox's Volume Shaper. Unlike a compressor, a volume shaping tool works independently of your kick's dynamics. It will turn down the bass exactly the same every time, no matter the volume level of the trigger signal. So it's generally more consistent and more precise for kick and bass sidechaining. A volume shaping plugin can also reach total silence if needed, which can be difficult or impossible with a compressor. And these plugins often have extra features dedicated to sidechain ducking, such as oscilloscopes, waveform overlays, multiband, and click smoothing. So when it comes to which one to use, you can use either or both, depending on the situation. Compressors are great for reactive, organic, lively ducking, when you want the amount of gain reduction to vary depending on the strength of the trigger signal. And when you need more control and consistency, volume shaping will give you a tight and shapeable curve without unpredictable volume variances, which I prefer for clean kick and bass ducking. But the final choice is yours. You should demo the various options and see what fits your workflow. Speaking of which, I'm often asked what the difference is between Volume Shaper and Kickstart and when one should be used over the other for sidechaining. If I could choose only one, I'd go for Volume Shaper, as it can technically do everything Kickstart can do and loads more. However, there is room for both. Kickstart is simple and streamlined, which is perfect for quick ducking. It's all about speed and simplicity and staying in the flow. That's why I use Kickstarts in my default writing template. Volume Shaper, on the other hand, has more advanced features. Running inside Shaperbox, it's got multiband processing, custom curve drawing, and detailed control and visualization. I often start with Kickstart for speed while writing and laying down ideas, and then later if I want more detailed curve editing or multiband, I'll switch over to Volume Shaper for fine-tuning. Both have fully functional demos with no time limit, so you can try them for yourself at Cableguys.com. Now let's talk about curves. The shape of your sidechain curve plays a huge role in achieving the right groove and feel for your track. Like I said, if you're using a compressor, the release time is usually the main parameter for shaping the groove. Or there's also hold if your compressor has it. If you're using a volume shaping plugin, you can sculpt your curve a lot more. Here I'm using Kickstart to duck the bass on every kick. Because I've routed my kick into Kickstart's sidechain input, you can see both the kick and bass waveforms on the oscilloscope. These visuals are a useful guide. Each of these preset curves has a different slope and timing. A sharper ramp up from silence to full volume feels more urgent, which makes sense. It's more of an on-off effect, like a gate. A more gradual ramp up feels lazier and a bit groovier. but it's the curve's horizontal position that has the most impact on the groove. Ramping up earlier in time has more urgency. The further right you shift the curve, the more obvious and lazy the effect, because it takes the bass longer to reach full volume. So feel the change in groove and urgency as you try out curves and shift their center points to get the feel you want. For more creative control, you can design your own sidechain curves from scratch. Here in ShaperBox, I'll click Volume's Sidechain button. This quick preset loads VolumeShaper at a quarter note speed with the sidechain preset curves ready to go. A quick pro tip, here in the menu you can save this or any setup as ShaperBox's startup preset. So whenever you add ShaperBox, you get your favourite sidechain setup straight away. Anyway, here I've already routed the kick into the sidechain input, and I'll turn on audio mode and activate the external sidechain. So now my kick is re-triggering VolumeShaper's LFO. Down here are the preset sidechain curves. You can tweak them to fit, or use them as inspiration to draw your own curves from scratch. Watch my LFO drawing video for how to do this properly. The S-curve pen is good for stamping a sidechain shape. From here, listen to how the kick and bass groove together, and edit the points to fit your curve to your track's tempo and groove. You can highlight only certain points and move them. To try out different options, store a few variations in the wave palette slots, then click through to compare them. You can switch through them with automation or MIDI too, in case you want to change curves throughout the song. And you only need to design a sidechain curve once. If you like it, save it in your favourite section for easy recall in future sessions. Another important factor to consider is the strength or amount of sidechaining. In Kickstart and VolumeShaper, use the mix knob to apply more or less ducking. Think of it as controlling how deep or shallow the curve goes. So turning mix down is essentially the same as me reducing the curve depth, like this. The default 100% mix equals full strength ducking to silence, and is a good starting point. But if your sidechaining sounds too strong, pumpy or unnatural, reduce the strength and blend some of the unducked bass in with the kick. Most of this comes down to taste, the genre you're making and the kick and bass you're using. Now let's look at how to overcome an annoying side effect when sidechaining bass. Sudden volume changes in a waveform can cause audible clicking and popping artifacts. These clicks and pops are especially noticeable when sidechaining low-frequency sounds like subbass. So how can we remove these artifacts? First, check if your bass is clicking or popping at the source. If you're using a synth or sampler, try turning up its amp envelope's attack and release just a little bit. If it's your sidechain compressor that's clicking and popping, there are a few things you can try. Adjust its release time, look-ahead value, or ratio. If you're using Kickstart or VolumeShaper, we've added something called anti-click trigger smoothing to the audio and MIDI modes. On by default, this uses 6 milliseconds of latency to apply a small fade just before the trigger point, preventing clicks. A quick side note, having this option on will cause the LFO to open a tiny bit early, which is great for smooth sidechaining. However, if you're using VolumeShaper for hard-edged clicky patterns or for gating, you might not want this smoothing effect. So turn smoothing off in the menu if you want the LFO to act instantly with no smoothing. Anyway, back to removing clicks. In VolumeShaper, you can also reach for the LFO's smooth control, which softens out hard angles in the LFO waveform. It's set to 40% by default, which is generally enough to smooth out clicks straight away, but feel free to bump this up a bit. And you can also tweak your LFO curve by fine amounts to add fades and smooth out any artifacts. All of this is enough to remove clicks 99.9% of the time. On the rare occasion where a troublesome sub-bass still clicks, try using a low-pass filter after your sidechain plugin. Now, if you want a sidechain in stealth to get all the mix benefits without hearing any pumping, multiband sidechaining is for you. Put simply, instead of ducking an entire signal, you isolate one particular frequency range and then duck only that region. sidechain the lows and leave the highs unducked for less audible pumping. And you can go even further with more detailed setups. To find out all about this technique and to take your sidechaining to the next level, you'll want to watch my advanced sidechaining video, and find out more about Kickstart, VolumeShaper and our other plugins at Cableguys.com.